Therapy Deconstructed. And this month, I am speaking with someone that you may have heard of. He is the author of 6 books, and he writes about social commentary. And my guest, Douglas Robbins, he also has his own podcast called The Douglas Robbins Show. But the reason he's on here is, full disclosure, he's a friend. He's somebody that but he has an interesting sort of take on mental health and kind of why we've got some roots in misunderstandings that lead to the stigma. He writes about it, he talks about it, and I just really wanted you all to get a chance to hear his wise words. So welcome to my show, Douglas.
Thank you for the very kind introduction. So nice to be with you, Bonnie.
It's so great because, we've had some casual conversations about this, obviously, as a psychologist. And I always laugh because when I meet someone, they either lean in and want to talk to me or they run away. And you definitely leaned in. And we've had some great conversations. And I really want to, the podcast is called Therapy Deconstructed. I really want to hear from your perspective, because I think you've fleshed out some of these ideas quite a bit with your writing and your commentary on social media and such. So tell us what you think about some of the ideas around mental health and where you think some of the misunderstandings are when it comes to, I think for you, it's about the emotions, emotional intelligence.
Yeah, it's such a broad spectrum. Emotional intelligence, mental health, and it's such a strange term, mental health, because you don't walk around typically speaking about physical health, right? Even though we all know physical health is important. But only in recent years, really, has mental health really come to the forefront and mainstream. And I think it's because it's one of those things that you can't see. A lot of people don't know how to deal with it. It's not as easily addressed as, say, like you have a broken arm, that's obvious. And it's obvious to go how to address it. It's an acute issue. You go to your doctor, they said it, and 6 weeks or whatever later, you're better again. Emotions are much trickier, and many people don't know how to address them. And parents certainly don't know how to address them. They're suffering from their own issues. The education system certainly does not address them. They address your intellect. Can you regurgitate? Can you do math problems? Can you remember dates and times from World War II or whatever? But they don't develop you emotionally. And so I actually just did a podcast on this on my show about that, in that we're really failing ourselves because there's a reason people are the way they are when they're 30, 40, 50, all this anger and vitriol and blame and victimhood, because the stuff that they're carrying, typically childhood wounds, are never addressed. So let's say something happens to you when you're 4, 5, 6, 7 years old. You then get indoctrinated into sort of the school system and the rah, 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 to a point, nationalism, and getting indoctrinated into society. And so you're learning things, but you're not developing emotionally. So you have an intellect that's developing, but parallel, the emotions are not developing. Therefore, mental health is not developing. And I think mental health is based upon emotional health and your interpretation of things, because it always goes through that filter of how you see yourself, how you see the world. And if your filter is negative and hurt and pain and victim and blame, well, that's going to be your viewpoint when you come out of school. So you go into school, whatever, 4, 5, 6 years old, you then come out of school whenever you do, but you're the same person emotionally that you've been in many ways. And these places that you get triggered and stuck and all that, and you go kaboom, it's because none of this stuff has ever been addressed. You're still in those same states chronologically, as far as years. You're still in that kid place of 4 years old or 5 years old when something traumatic happened, and all these events and all these sort of beliefs that connected to all these emotions. And now you come out of school the other end, you're supposed to be an adult now. Well, how on earth are you supposed to be an adult now when you have basically no lessons on how to be an adult, how to navigate adult things, how to have mature responses to people. And then, my goodness, you have children and you're putting the same crap into your children you've been holding on to, all this yucky shame and anger, and you don't know where else to put it. So it's natural that these generational issues continue on because it's very hard to break them unless you're doing an awful lot of self-healing yourself. And like I said, parents are only as good as their own, kind of state of mind. The education system isn't teaching you anything on this. So then you come out into the world as an adult, but you're not an adult. You're undeveloped. You might have some intellect and can talk about certain things, but much of your personality is probably still stuck in the past, undeveloped. And so now you have the world that you have. So I feel like it's not addressed properly, that as if the intellect is the only part of us, right? But there's a much broader part, and that is the subconscious, which is really the emotional field. And I don't remember the number exactly, but it's something like the conscious brain can only process something like 40 bits a second or something like that, where the subconscious can process millions of bits. I mean, that's all your memories, your stored emotions, your stored traumas. And if you don't heal that stuff, you're going to have the world we have now.
Mm. Wow.
It was a mouthful.
Yeah. But you know what? It makes me think. I have two things. First, I just want to say, when you were talking for a completely different project and something that would to be continued that I'll talk about later, I was looking back at some things I had written about my childhood, and I've been very open on this podcast about my growing up with an abusive alcoholic father. And I was looking back at some of it, and what really struck me is I never told a teacher. I never told an administrator. I never told a friend. I went to school every day and I plastered on my happy face, and I got rewarded for that. I got rewarded for being a good student, for, participating, for getting good grades. And think about how many hours over your lifespan that you're in school, especially think about that young period when I was, like kindergarten, all the grade school stuff. Never breathed a word, never even thought about it. Honestly, I don't think I ever thought about it. So I'm just hearing you speak and thinking it didn't feel like a safe environment for me to share. And I was getting rewarded for being the happy kid, for showing up and getting good grades. I just think as a child, I probably never even felt like it was the appropriate place to go, which was tragic because it's the place I spent a lot of time with, and I had good teachers. It wasn't like I had horrible time there, but I just never felt safe enough. So I'm just validating what you said, because I think that's really, really interesting. That wasn't a place for me to go with all of my pain. The second thing I wanted to say was, so what do we do? How do we do this? I'm going to ask you to create the curriculum for the country, but how does that education system uh, allow a 6-year-old who was in the throes of so much confusion, so much violence, so much pain? How do we provide an opening for her emotionally for her to start processing anything?
When you're a child, you absorb everything, right? You absorb everything, especially from your parents. So there are no boundaries, right? You're a sponge to them, a sponge to the education system. So when you're a child, like anything else, you need to learn tools. So part of any self-help or recovery is sometimes maybe you journal on something. Why do I feel so bad? Tools of how to have boundaries. For instance, your father, and it's sometimes just having a little tool can be your shield, right? Your father acted in such a manner that it had nothing to do with you personally, right? It wasn't Bonnie, you're doing these horrible things, you're just a child, right? So he's struggling with his own demons, and because you're all vulnerable to him, he lashes out. He's not doing that at work. He's not walking down the street doing that to people, right? He's doing that to the people closest to him and the people most vulnerable to him, typically children, right? They can't really fight back. So they're vulnerable, they don't have boundaries, and they can't stop it. And so when you have some basic tools that are provided, Bonnie, what your father was doing wasn't about you. Let's identify, what, like write down what was happening with you at the time. Did you do anything to prompt this? Did you burn the house down? Did you do some horrific thing? His response is not about you. And I think as a child, you don't know that. You assume it's about you because everything that happens is about you. When the teacher acts like whatever, it's about you. When your parents act like that, it's about you. But the truth be told, it is not about you. And you were saying about the teachers, like you're playing a role, right? You don't know you're playing a role, but these are great tools to identify. Okay, I'm playing this role. I'm being the good girl. Am I happy here? Does this feel good to me? Let's say something worse happened. You were sexually abused by a parent or something. Starting to write these things down and identifying what's happening. These are the tools that start protecting us. And these are the tools that start creating boundaries, because when you have emotional resilience, when you have emotional fortitude, that's where boundaries are formed, because you say, okay, there's a separation now between me and him. There's a separation between this and that. So I'll tell you a quick story. So when I was a kid, I think I was shunned a lot, rejected a lot. My parents were not abusive in physical terms. Probably they were good folks, but kind of quite neglectful and shunned me a lot. Oh, that's stupid. That's stupid. More from my father. And so when I went into school, I was already kind of broken and felt like, very low self-esteem. I wasn't built up. Like, yeah, Doug, that's a great idea. Really smart, really inventive. It was quite the opposite, shut down. And so I always had this stigma that I was stupid, right? And so I started believing and acting accordingly. Well, if I'm stupid, I'm going to prove I'm right. The ego is always looking to prove right. I must be stupid. Here you go, everyone, I'm stupid. So I didn't really do great in school, especially earlier on, because I wanted really nothing to do with it. But in third grade, this mean teacher, who was known for kind of being mean and cruel, I hadn't done the homework that night. And so I sat in the back of the room, and she would write the homework, the answers down on the chalkboard while going over them. So I was like, oh, fucking brilliant. Pardon me. I'm going to write the answers down now. Seemed brilliant to me. And she saw what I was doing. I went to a very large school with probably 35 plus kids in the classroom. And I saw her eyes kind of zero in on me like a hawk. And she bellowed at the top of her lungs, like, Douglas Robbins, what are you doing? What are you, stupid? And so she reinforced my fears. And she was the authority, so I trusted her. And this is also the danger as a child. You're trusting of authorities, generally speaking. They know best. They know right from wrong. So I trusted this woman, and I was shattered. I sat there like dumbfounded, like you could hear it. All the kids were quiet. Nobody would even look at me. There was such shame associated with it.
Yeah.
But was it about that I was really stupid? No, it had nothing to do with my intelligence whatsoever. It had to do with this teacher who really was clearly not fit to teach in this regard or know how to respond. Back then it was just sort of, as a teacher, you could kind of get away with such harshness. Nowadays, you could not. And I wanted to run. I wanted to run down and out of the school and wanted the whole school to chase after me and come back. But I didn't. I just sat there dumbfounded. And then the following days, I went to her after class and I cleaned erasers with her, waiting and hoping for her to acknowledge that she was wrong or to apologize to me, acknowledge what had happened. She never did, which also just reinforced the abuse, basically. But if there had also been, say, a course saying, because plenty of teachers are abusive, plenty of any authority figure, fill in the blank, are wrong. They're abusive. They're not really fit because they're not emotionally fit. A teacher should have handled that better. Hey, Doug, what's going on back there? Look, seems like you're doing XYZ, and I hope you're not, but maybe we can discuss this, whatever. So shaming a child is really not a good approach
No.
to teaching. You're no longer teaching your subject. Now you've gone outside of that. So I think if anyone has some tools that they start learning, meditation is great. Trying to identify, letting go, writing things down, journaling, tools on how to handle these things, tools on forgiveness, tools on being aware of someone, like I said, it is not you. And just asking yourself a question, is this true? Often can break that chain because, you often walk through life, again, stuck in these places, thinking it was you. You were the victim. Yeah, you were a victim. But if you just stay a victim, you never get out of that. And so I think if you have tools, you could start moving through it. So if I had identified in another class, hey, this made me feel bad. What it makes you feel bad? Sometimes I have classes that kids draw things, and the teacher will go, "What's going on here? This is really dark." And the teacher kind of is alerted to it. But we don't typically do that in other ways. So again, I just feel like we're really failing ourselves, because if you come out with school a mature person, then you're ready for adulthood. If they teach you business acumen, you're a therapist, but you never learn business acumen because no one's teaching it. They're teaching you therapy. So all these things, it's so strange because it seems so obvious that you need all these tools to come out the other end to be a functioning adult. If not, you're going to fail. You're going to crash and burn. And that's not serving people. That's, to me, not what education could or should be.
Yeah. I thank you for that. I think it's so interesting when you think about this stuff as tools, because I'm always talking about how we are a product of what's happened to us. And people want to say, oh, well, that's just my personality, or that's just
Sure.
how I am. I can't change.
Works.
That's always a bit of a challenge in therapy, because I firmly believe we are so much a product of what's happened to us. And so it requires us spending time, which I've obviously done and you've obviously done, thinking about what's happened to you as a result of what's now colored your view of the world, what lens you put on in the morning as a result of my having gone through what I went through. And I could easily, I think, have stayed in a place that was of a victim and feeling just wronged by the world and full of shame and blame myself, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
stayed in that position, which is not a position of power or a position of
Yeah.
sort of living a fulfilled life that you could live. It's more of a
Yeah.
position of being, just waiting for the next thing to happen to you, and that you have no real decision or choice in the matter, which also I think is a tragic thing that can happen to children when they haven't been given these tools that you're talking about. And as you were talking, I was thinking it wouldn't even be that hard to talk in more general speak to kids, young little children, giving them the opportunity to speak about things, but also just in general terms, talking about emotions, not instead of don't cry or whatever, just what's happening right now. Can we talk about how
Yeah.
you're feeling, and being able to, for kids to feel safe enough to discuss their feelings and safe enough to feel that they won't be judged. Do you feel as a young boy that it was even harder because of maybe the more of a even harsher stigma that men aren't supposed to have these
Yeah.
emotions?
I mean, my father I see him as two different people. So when I was young, he was very angry and very isolated. Um, and not an emotional guy. Would not, I mean, he would blow up sometimes, but he would not reveal anything. And I think back then, kids' opinions didn't matter squat. Your desires, your individuality, your whatever. Nobody cares. Your opinion, nobody cares. Your parents are just going to say this or that, and you have to go along with it, basically. Today, I think that's a little different. But my father, very much a stoic in that regard, would burden whatever, So I think for boys, I think women are much more advanced and evolved than we are in this regard, and probably in many other ways too. But, women are naturally more socially inclined. For instance, girls will sleep in the same bed together, or even women will sleep in the same bed together sometimes, not in a sexual manner, just, hey, let's share a room or whatever it is. Men are far less inclined to do that. And I think women are just naturally more in tune with themselves and what's going on with them. And I think men have to they're supposed to be tough, they're supposed to be strong, they're supposed to be masculine, they're supposed to be man up, whatever. Don't cry, and that's the problem. Is you're supposed to push it all down, and so look. I mean, Thoreau wrote that line. Most men lead quiet lives of quiet desperation years ago.
Yeah,
it is still true to this day that men lead lives of quiet desperation because they're suffering and they don't know what to do with all their suffering, or where to go with it, or how to address it, and it simmers and manifests and comes out in ugly sorts of ways. Look at all the narcissists and wars and all the crap going on, like typically men. I see a lot of women doing this. So
yeah,
I think it's very hard for men. My goodness, the suicide rate is the highest with men, middle-aged men.
yeah, yeah. So that in part why I applaud you so much for being on here and talking about it. And just in your general life, I think that's why when I met you and you just were so calm and willing to speak about how you were feeling and what was going on around you. And even if you weren't, you have this approach that's it feels as if you're going to allow your emotional intelligence to shine through in what you're talking about. You bring that into every conversation, I find, which is why I think you're so lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Is this something that, thinking about a listener out there right now and a young man or
Yeah.
anyone who hasn't had therapy, hasn't thought about it as something that could be beneficial for them, but are suffering from whatever, some sort of challenge for themselves. What do you suppose, how did you get to this amazing evolved man that you are here sitting
I'm
before me?
not that evolved, but thank you. I
We'll bring
still
your
have
wife on later and
shortcomings,
see what she says. Yeah.
still plenty of shortcomings and struggles, and there's always something. You clear one place and then you realize, oh, there's something else behind that. It really is a connect the dots in there, that internal world. I would say this, it's easy to get looking into the external. We often attach emotions to all sorts of things. If I had that car, everything's going to be great. If I had $1 million, everything's going to be great. If I had, whatever, it's all going to be great. Look, those things can be nice. Don't get me wrong. Money is great, and cars, you need them, and whatever. But that's not going to heal you. And so often we feel surrounded by emotions because we're connecting to events that are causing us to suffer. But, obviously therapy, meditation, um, listening to good podcasts that are just, feeding your mind positive tools. There's plenty of podcasts um, that feed your mind positive tools on, maybe this way I'm thinking isn't the only way I can think. So often what happens is we have some crappy event that happened, and then we start looking at life through that one filter because that happened. Well, life must be that. But that's not true. It's just one event that happened. We keep reinforcing it with the same, yeah, you suck. Yeah, you suck, or whatever it is. Yeah, this happened. I'm a loser. I'm a victim. We don't realize it in terms of, we're not saying, yeah, you're a victim, but that's what the emotional belief is saying.
Yeah.
And so, just putting good stuff in there, it is so easy to escape because we don't feel good. We feel yucky. We don't want to deal with whatever. It feels terrible. So we want to escape into social media, which is can be just a nightmare of random crap, that doesn't help you. But what I think we're often looking for is ourselves. We're looking for a reflection of ourselves or a connection. So, my goodness, laughter. I love laughter, finding people that you can laugh with or just taking some burden off of you. But, just putting healthy things into your brain, it's a process like anything else. And, listening to your show, my show, there's a million, great podcasts or great, self help books or going to groups. Because, when you go to a group, we met in Costa Rica, you feel so empowered. You feel like I'm not alone in this. You feel like I can do anything because there are like-minded people here that are doing something similar. And I think part of the challenge in our society is the feeling of isolation. When you're isolated, you feel very alone. You feel weak because you can't fight the world. It's too big. It's too powerful. But when you have a friend that is on the same page or a few people you're sitting with, you're like, we can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we were before the show, we were talking about networking and connecting to other people. And, I'm a huge proponent of interconnection. We need each other. No one, I don't care who you are, has gotten anywhere alone. And so just, I'm sure you felt it when you feel alone and isolated, it's a terrible feeling. And then you see someone or talk to someone about it, you feel a million times better. Or when you go to a group or a networking thing or a retreat or whatever it is that you're interested in, you just feel different. You feel human again. Instead of like a murky puddle of water that just was stagnant. Because stagnant, we're not meant to be stagnant. And so to get back to one more thing I'll say about these emotions, they're stagnant, right? They're like a stuck pain, like you have a bruise on your knee or something that you just maintain because you think it's familiar, therefore you think it's real, therefore you think it has to remain there.
Yeah.
But it's something that needs to be healed and addressed so that energy can start flowing again, because we're not designed to be stagnant puddles.
I like that, stagnant puddles. You make me think about, I remember when I met my husband, I was in my mid and I thought I'd settled everything. I thought I was fine. I figured it all out. I had some therapy, but, I was working a job. I had living in a house with my sister. I had friends. My life was good. And I felt as if, I think I just felt like, yeah, well, that was my past. I got through that. I'm fine. And then fast forward a few months, when we got serious and I met his parents. And this was the first time really that I really fell in love. And it mattered to me to meet this family and that they would like me and that I would be part of it. And I didn't realize father, he's a tall man, about, a middle-aged guy. And he walked into the room and I nearly ran out of the room. And I was completely shocked by my response, but I was terrified of him. I assumed that he was going to be my father. I assumed that he was going to behave like my father. And I watched him for months. We didn't live in the same city, so I didn't see him all the time. But when I did see him, I'd always watch him because my father would have an outburst out of nowhere, and it was always unsafe because you never knew when or how or what. And my husband's father could not be the more opposite, just the sweetest, kindest, non-threatening man. But I had laid on top of him these expectations, and I didn't realize I was doing it. I didn't realize that was sitting inside of me until I met this man who I wanted to be part of this family. It mattered to me. And I took my ass off to therapy because I thought, wow, it was so strong. It was almost hard to resist my fear of him based on nothing that he was doing. I was just thinking about that when you were saying that, first of all, we're never done and dusted. It was always something to think about and work on and really try to question for ourselves. But that was such a big moment for me to realize that there was something sort of dormant hanging out back there, but it was coloring my view of middle-aged men. Period. All middle-aged men. And I had assigned that just without any conscious thought whatsoever. So it just made me think of that story where, you're just talking about how it's essential that we look at how we see our world and how we see ourselves in it, because we
Yeah.
all bring that stuff to our current day,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
And especially intimate settings, intimate relationships are going to challenge you the most. They're going to trigger you the most. They're going to trip you up the most. If you saw a middle-aged guy at the supermarket, it wouldn't matter to you. He doesn't mean anything to you.
right.
But he was representative of your father or a father figure. And so like, intimate relationships, because again, we're vulnerable, that's where we get tripped, is that vulnerability. And that's why if we can develop and strengthen our emotional fortitude and boundaries, if you had been in a better place, right, and you had healed all this stuff, and no one's healed when they're 25, but anyway, depending upon what you experience, but you know, you would have possibly had a different reaction to him or response to him. Um, but again, the intimate situations, those are the most challenging ones.
Yeah. And the gift of that is that it highlighted it for me and I went to work on it.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's the gift, right? In the emotional relationships, in these vulnerable, close relationships that matter to us, that's where the work really needs to be done, because
Yes, ma'am.
they won't be a success. We won't be able to endure them because we will bring all of that into that relationship, because
Yeah,
that's where it then shows up. Um,
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. You could have said, I can't, let's say you fast forward, you go, your father's going to be there. No, I can't go. Your
exactly.
father is having a party. No, can't go. Um, it will happen, and your brain will tell you it's for other reasons, until you really start looking at where it's coming from, why it's there, and that's to get back to something you were saying earlier. Oh, that's just the way I am. I don't like being around middle-aged men. Like whatever it is, that's where people get trapped in sort of automatic or autopilot programs and go, no, I'm just a victim. No, I'm a loser. No, I can't do this. That's too much. But, like no one cares about me. Whatever. That's just the mind reflecting the thoughts and emotions that you've reinforced.
Yeah,
Right? You
yeah,
go, nah, I can't do it. That's
yeah.
just me. I can't do it.
And think of the loss, think of the
Terrible.
wonderful middle-aged men that I would have not met.
Right. But think of the longing when you hold
Yeah,
on to this stuff, you still long for that better life. You still
sure.
long for the peace. It's
Yeah,
not like you stop. It's just those emotions get in your, they're basically just hurdles, emotional belief hurdles that get in your way of that better life, because you're holding on. And this is something I write about in a lot of my books. When you're holding on to the wrong things, that gets you away from the dream and the fulfilled life that you seek. And we don't realize it. The fulfilled life or the dreams are really just fulfilling the potentials we all have. It's not some dream like, ooh, some spooky, woo woo thing. It's just, what is your potential here?
yeah, yeah. I love that. I really love that. You're quite a deep thinker there, Mr. Robbins.
So deep I step in it sometimes, Bonnie.
Hey, that's what comes with the territory. That's what comes with the territory. I love your honesty and your openness about this. Can you tell people how to find your books, how to find you, how to listen to more of your insights and ways of thinking?
Yeah, thank you. So you can find me in general at douglasrobinsauthor.com. If you sign up, put your email, you get a free story called Barbecue Dinner, which I think is a very special story, sort of about a father who becomes, or a businessman who his business is failing, and he falls in love with this woman with children, and he never thought he was going to meet someone to fall in love with, but he's so scared to tell her that his business is failing. It chokes me up because he feels like he's not worthwhile then, that he's not worthy of love then.
How have I missed this? I've got to go sign up right after this. I had no idea I got a free book from
It's
you.
I think it's a lovely story. Or you could buy the book that is from called Leaves Piled High, which has other stories just about, you know, these struggles and overcoming things. And as one reviewer wrote, like, where you are, is it really the place you want to be? Something along those lines. But it's a lovely story. Barbecue dinner is a story you get for free if you sign up, or the book is called Leaves Piled High that it comes from. But so you can find me there. You can find my books on Amazon. My most recent one is called Baseball Dreams of Bikers. And it's really about holding on to those dreams because it's easy to fall off the path. And sometimes you don't even know you're falling off the path. So that's that one. The previous one was called Love in a Dying Town, about a single father raising a daughter. And again, when we hold on to the wrong ideas, sometimes we hold on to the wrong relationships, hoping they're going to get us where we want to go. The wrong stuff never gets us to the right place. It could inform the right place, but holding on to the wrong stuff will never get you there. So you can find me, I guess, on Amazon. And my show is called The Douglas Robbins Show. The last episode was about education and how we can do better and really transform it to create a whole person who goes into adulthood ready to go. I think you transform the world by transforming education.
And your podcast is everywhere if there's podcasts, right?
Everywhere. Yeah, Spotify, Apple, Amazon. Yeah.
And I'll make sure this all gets in the show notes too.
Okay, thank you.
Any last thoughts? Any words of wisdom, pearls you want to leave us with?
Well, it's been such a pleasure spending time with you again, and I just feel like I love podcasts because anyone can do one. It's such a great way to connect. So if anyone out there is thinking about doing a podcast because they have a topic they love and are passionate about, please do it. It is not expensive, and you can get your word and your voice out there because everyone's voice needs to get out there. That's why we are here on this planet. We are not alone. We are here connected, and we are here to better serve each other.
Well said. Very well said. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like we could have talked a lot longer. I love your ideas. And I think, just to leave my audience with the idea from Doug that just because you may be struggling and just because you may be feeling things or feel maybe even a bit hopeless or just really low, just understanding that it doesn't have to be a permanent condition and that there's always hope and there's always a way forward. And it's often, if not always, involving someone else, asking for help, connecting with someone, speaking with somebody, just speaking up. And I think, thinking back to myself and my own journey, I think things could have possibly gone different if I had had somebody early on that could have started just dropping in these insights into my mind so that it wasn't, I graduated from high school full of self-blame, shame, self-loathing, all the selves. And then I just feel like it could have been maybe a bit of a shorter journey for me to find my own sense of self-love. And
yeah, think if you would unpack some of that, if you had some guidance from someone who understood this, could it change your trajectory?
Yeah.
And also to the person who might be alone and suffering, because suffering is the worst thing, switch gears, reframe, disrupt that. And you can disrupt it by watching something that's funny, going out and getting some fresh air, just trying to think about something different, gratitude. Oh, the sun is shining. It can disrupt these thoughts and really make a big difference.
Yeah. And as a psychologist, I do offer a free 30-minute consultation. So should you feel like you'd want to discuss things a little further around the therapy realm, I am available for that and would love to chat with you about what your options are and how to move forward. So thanks again, Doug. I really enjoyed this. And we may have to do it again sometime.
I would love that anytime.
All right. See you later.
Thank you, Bonnie.